We just heard from the National Organization for Women's president of the New York chapter, who talked about what this means for women going forward. But what comes next for Schneiderman? And who will be in charge of the investigation? And, if convicted, what type of sentence is Schneiderman facing? Joining us now is Julie Rendelman, a former Brooklyn assistant district attorney who prosecuted sex crimes and homicide and is now a defense attorney in her own right. Julie, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
So first, of course, let's talk with any potential charges. If charges were to be brought against Mr. Schneiderman, what are we talking about?
Sure. So I think the maximum he's facing is misdemeanor charges. We're talking about assault. What we say in New York is assault in the third degree and criminal obstruction of breathing. Those two seem to be the charges that fit with at least the alleged allegations. However, there is an issue with the statute of limitations with regards to at least one of the alleged victims.
And when you say there's something with that, I mean, has it been too much time that's gone by?
So there's a 2-year statute of limitations when it comes to misdemeanor charges, and at least one of the alleged victims appears to make allegations that occurred, I believe, between 2013 and 2015. So that would be a problem in terms of going forward criminally with those cases.
But that would
that
just
specific case.
Yeah, and that specific one, the other
Correct.
ones would hold if those women chose to bring charges.
If they chose, remember, at least 2 of the alleged victims have not given their names, but the one that has made allegations of assault, and those could potentially be viable in terms of the statute of limitations.
Well, then that brings up the next question of who even has jurisdiction over this, because under normal circumstances, it would be Cy Vance, except that that would be complicated because Schneiderman's office was investigating Cy Vance's Manhattan DA's office. So then for them to... anyway, there's layers to it.
It's a little messy,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, politics is always messy. And so it is possible that they could bring in a special prosecutor to look at this case. Remember, this is an investigation, so it's very, very early stages. We don't know, whether the witnesses or the victims even want to go forward and whether they're willing to go forward. And then the next question becomes, is there corroboration of what they're saying? Is there evidence that supports it? Because remember, it was a while before they chose to come forward, and there's questions that need to be asked, that should be asked, to have a really clear and fair investigation of this case.
Aside from the potential assault charges that might be brought, is there any possibility for any abuse of office? Some of the other allegations that were made were that the Attorney General would say, I have the power to have your phone's tapped or have you followed, or, I am the law.
That's a great question. And, I hate to say time will tell. I think the biggest concern for him right now is the assault allegations. The potential is that he could be sentenced to up to a year in jail. It won't happen in these type of cases because that's not the norm to happen. But yes, there are other charges that are potential. It depends on how the investigation reveals itself.
All right. Well, then, if you were his attorney, because I guess technically we can still say Attorney General Schneiderman until tomorrow, but the point is that he's already come out and made a statement, and that seems sort of odd given that he's an attorney. You're an attorney. What would you advise him as a client?
I mean, the simple answer that any attorney is going to say is keep your mouth shut. Anything you say, everyone, an attorney, both a prosecutor and defense, knows that anything you say can be used against you in the future. So when you start responding to allegations, those responses can be used to further corroborate and support what the victims are saying. And so keep your mouth shut, let your attorney do the talking.
But does it get complicated by the fact that he's also an elected official? And so as an elected official, that makes a lot of sense to want to come out and make a statement just to clarify for...
Except that he resigned 2 minutes later. And so, when you go on Twitter, we all have a desire to defend ourselves. And sometimes silence is a better approach because we can defend ourselves once we know more of the details of what we're being accused of. And so any attorney in their right mind is going to say, keep your mouth shut until we know better what we're facing.
All right. Well, I do want to turn back a little bit to not necessarily the victims in this case, but to any other woman who might be in a situation, because, of course, this becomes, part of the whole point of the reckoning of Me Too is for these powerful men to be held to account. Yet you're saying that for at least for one of these possible potential cases, a statute of limitations may be in play. For women who have been in similar situations with incredibly powerful, well-known men, be it in New York, anywhere else, what would your advice be to them?
Look, no one can place themselves in a victim's shoes, and there's many reasons why people don't come forward. Sometimes it's because they're dealing with powerful men. Sometimes it's for their own reasons that they don't want to feel shame or the embarrassment of coming forward, because a lot of times, at least in the past, when a victim came forward, the media came after them instead of coming after the actual assaulter. So the assumption now times have hopefully changed that victims feel more comfortable coming forward. When you come forward quicker, there's more chance of there being additional evidence that supports your claim. So it makes it easier for the police and the district attorney's office to make a better investigation of the case and make your case stronger. So coming forward sooner is helpful, certainly in those situations.
But then again, in these specific situations, does it behoove these women the fact that it seems as if they documented and left a paper trail as much as humanly possible?
An amazing paper trail. This is not the norm, where you hear not just from witnesses, but alleged victims who took pictures of themselves and sent it to friends, and emails that were sent out at the time these incidents were happening. So yeah, I think documenting is of course helpful, but coming forward more quickly, and this is not a judgment of the individuals that didn't come forward.
Of course not.
But if I was as a former prosecutor, if I had my way, they would come forward quicker so that we can help deal with the perpetrator.
All right, well, final question then. What, at least from your perspective, do you think that we can expect to see with this situation? I mean, obviously, there's an interim attorney general. We'll see. The political side of it will play itself out. But when it comes to the legal side, what do you see on the horizon?
I think there's a possibility, and I'd be guessing, but there's certainly a possibility of criminal charges down the line with at least one of the victims. The fact that they came out, to me, indicates the potential that they're now willing to speak to the district attorney's office about what happened to them. And keep in mind, although the original alleged victim of which the statute of limitations has run may not be able to press criminal charges, she may be someone who is able to assist in the other charges, because there's something called modus operandi, which may be able to show that he tends to do these types of crimes, which is similar to what happened in Bill Cosby.
Yeah, I was going to say, and we just saw that play out. Listen, exactly. Julie, thank you so much for walking us through the legal maze of what may or may not be potential charges.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.